Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Floor, and today I'm going to be sharing with you some study that we did here at K-State looking at the effects of high levels of nicotinic acid on growth, carcass traits, and meat quality of finishing pigs. And this was a study that we conducted with the National Pork Board in the summer of 2013, and this abstract was also presented at the National Animal Science meetings in the summer of 2014 in Kansas City. Now we know that heat stress is a major contributor to seasonal losses experienced in swine production here in the U.S. St. Pierre and others in 2003 estimated that market hog losses of approximately $200 million were observed annually, and this was due to decreases in performance, but also due to increases in mortality that were associated with heat stress. Now, to date, there are several nutritional therapies that we utilize in swine nutrition to try to mitigate some of the effects of heat stress. The first is to increase the energy density of the diet. Typically, with heat stress, we see a reduction in feed intake, so we try to increase the energy content of the diet. And then we also have looked at decreasing crude protein concentrations in order to reduce metabolic heat increment produced by the animal. And then one of the extreme biological responses that animals use is actual vasodilation of the periphery, and this is a way that the animal tries to abate heat from the body to the surface of the skin in order to release that heat into the environment. Now, in human nutrition, high levels of nicotinic acid are used to reduce circulating lipid concentrations by reducing LDL levels in the blood and by promoting HDL levels in the blood. But one of the largest negative side effects of nicotinic acid supplementation that people commonly see when taking the supplement is what's known as flushing, or skin vasodilation. And our hypothesis, or the question that we had and wanted to answer, was, can the exogenous treatment that stimulates the skin vasodilation in human medicine also be used in swine to help mediate heat stress in those growing pigs? Now, there's been some previous work done with nicotinic acid. A study with dairy cows by Zimbelman and others in 2010 actually showed that supplementing high levels of nicotinic acid reduced heat stress during periods of high temperature. And then some previous work done by Real and others in 2001 found that supplementing high levels of nicotinic acid up to 550 milligrams per kilogram resulted in improved meat quality in pigs. So with that information, the objectives of the current study were to examine the influence of high levels of nicotinic acid on growth performance, body temperature, and meat quality of pigs raised in a commercial setting during summer months. In this study, we utilized 1,232 pigs, initially 27 kilograms, and we used those pigs in a 98-day study. We had 28 pigs per pen and 11 pens per dietary treatment. Pens in the barn were allotted to the one of the 4 dietary treatments in a randomized complete block design, with location within the barn acting as the blocking factor. The dietary treatments that we had in this study were made by adding nicotinic acid at either 0, 350, 700, or 1,050 milligrams per kilogram. The diets that we utilized in this study were corn and soybean meal based, with 20% dried distillers grains, and the basal diets also contain 30 milligrams per kilogram added niacin from the vitamin premix. So the dietary treatments in reality, as far as total dietary added nicotinic acid or niacin, would have ranged from 30 to 1,080 milligrams per kilogram when we include the 30 milligrams that came from the vitamin premix. And then we fed diets in 4 phases. with the same niacin or nicotinic acid concentrations in all phases. Also in the study, we utilized temperature loggers, and we collected temperature and humidity data within the barn. And in the middle of the study on day 57, 58, and 59, we also collected rectal and skin temperatures from 1 barrow and 1 gilt per pen at 5 time points throughout the day. Those time points were 600, 900, 1200, 1500, and 1800 hours. And then on day 98, the heaviest barrow and gilt were visually selected from each pen and were sent to a commercial abattoir for carcass traits and pH decline measurements, which we took at 45 minutes post-mortem, 3 hours post-mortem, and 21 hours post-mortem. Afterwards, a 40-centimeter segment of boneless longissimus muscle was used to determine purge loss and ultimate pH. And then 2.5-centimeter chops were cut from that boneless longissimus muscle, and those were used to measure subjective color scores, marbling scores, objective color, including L-star, A-star, and B-star values, and then 24-hour drip loss, and also muscle niacin concentrations. Now I've got a brief graph here depicting the temperatures within the barn during the study, the summer of 2013. And actually, if many of you remember, it was a fairly mild summer in the northern Midwest at this time. This study was conducted in a commercial barn in southwest Minnesota. And actually, the temperatures were fairly mild, and the period where we saw the most heat stress was actually at the end of August and the first week of September. But still, as a whole, we did not have as much of a heat stress impact this barn during this time period as we've seen in past data sets. A brief look at the diet composition we used in the study. Again, these were corn and soybean meal-based diets with 20% corn dried distillers grains. And in order to achieve our dietary treatments, we replace corn in the diet with nicotinic acid. And again, we can see that as our phases, as we progress through phases from 1 through 4, we increase corn, decrease soybean meal. If we go on and look at the calculated dietary analysis, we can see that SID lysine levels decreased as we progress through those through those dietary phases. Crude protein decreased. And if we look at the bottom, the analyzed dietary niacin concentrations, again, we're close to our formulated levels originally discussed, with our control having 30 milligrams per kilogram and analyzed at 40 milligrams per kilogram, and our high level analyzing about 10% over what our formulated concentration was. Now moving into the results, again, the information I'll share with you as far as growth performance, we'll have the dietary treatments again on the x-axis with dietary niacin expressed in milligrams per kilogram. And then the response on the y-axis, you can see for average daily gain from day 0 to 98, we saw no significant influence of niacin on average daily gain with p-values greater than 0.4. If we look at average daily feed intake, we did see a tendency for increasing niacin concentration in the diet to increase average daily feed intake. But again, that was not statistically significant. And if you look at gain to feed, again, similar as average daily gain, we did not see a significant influence with p-values greater than 0.15. Now moving into the carcass results, what I've done here is actually displayed on top a table with the gender effects on the carcass results, just to show that we did see our typical responses associated with gender. When we talk about carcass traits, again, barrows had a significantly heavier hot carcass weight and significantly more back fat, whereas gilts had larger loin depths and also improved lean percentages. And then on the bottom, there's a table depicting the main effects of the dietary treatments, where we saw no significant influence on carcass traits associated with dietary niacin concentration. Okay, looking at loin pH decline, again on the x-axis we have the time of measurement, 45 minutes post-mortem, 3 hours, 21 hours, or after a 10-day aging period where we collected ultimate pH measurements, and each line represents the 4 dietary treatments, and on the y-axis is the pH itself. And at 45 minutes post-mortem, we saw a linear reduction in pH with increasing niacin concentration. And then actually at 3 hours, we saw a niacin by gender interaction, which we were not expecting, and honestly, it's hard to explain the biological response, but this was driven by the fact that gilts fed either 30 or 730 milligrams per kilogram of niacin, had higher pHs than barrows on the same dietary treatment, and then the opposite was observed with barrows having higher pHs when fed 380 or 1,080 milligrams per kilogram niacin compared to gilts on the same dietary treatment. Again, it was probably an artifact of the data. We only had 22 reps per dietary treatment observed in the meat quality data, so it may just be an artifact of our data set. We biologically don't know why we observed that interaction. At 21 hours post-mortem, we again saw a linear reduction in pH with increasing niacin concentration. And then in ultimate pH, we again saw a significant gender influence, which we did not expect. Now, looking at a table of the meat quality measurements themselves, again, I'm going to give you the cliff notes because this is a fairly large table. But what we saw was that we had a significant influence of gender on chop color and chop marbling score. And again, these would be subjective scores associated with those individual chops, with barrows having a significantly higher color score and significantly more marbling. And then as far as dietary niacin treatments, what we did observe was a significant increase in A-star values with increasing niacin. And again, A-star would represent the redness of the cut. And we saw a significant increase in B-star values with increasing dietary niacin, and B values would represent the yellowness of the meat. But when we asked our meat science faculty on staff about these differences, visually you would not be able to determine these differences in A-star and B-star value, although they are statistically significant. And finally, the last thing I'll review today is the temperature measurements that we collected on pigs, again, on day 57, 58, and 59 of the study. We collected temperatures at 5 different time points throughout the day. And what we observed during this collection period was that at 600 hours on day 57, we saw a linear increase in rectal temperature, with increasing niacin supplementation. And then at 1200 hours, or at noon on day 57, we saw a quadratic increase again in rectal temperatures with increasing niacin concentration. And this was mainly driven by the fact that as you increase from 30, which is the red line, to 380 milligrams per kilogram, there was a rapid decrease in rectal temperature, but then an increase again as we went from 380 to 730 milligrams per kilogram. And then at 1500, 1800 hours on day 57 and 1500 hours on day 59, we saw a significant gender effect, with barrows having having higher rectal temperatures than gilts. But again, nothing consistently observed across our sampling period. Now, we collected skin temperatures at the top of the rump and also the top of the shoulders, and both responded similarly, so I'm going to focus my discussion just on the rump temperature collections here today. But what we saw was that at 900 hours on day 57, there was a significant quadratic influence with increasing niacin, and this again was mainly driven by the fact that as we went from 30 milligrams per kilogram to 380 milligrams per kilogram, we saw a decrease in skin temperature and then an increase as we went from 380 back up to 730 milligrams per kilogram. And then at 900 hours on day 58, we saw a linear decrease in rump skin temperature as we increased from 30 to 1,080 milligrams per kilogram. But again, nothing consistent over our sampling period as far as results. So in conclusion from this study, we were unfortunately performing the study in a commercial finisher during a summer month where we did not elicit the heat stress model that we were really intending to. Again, it was a cool and mild summer there in 2013 in that part of the country. But regardless, increasing dietary niacin above the animal's estimated requirement did not elicit a meaningful benefit in growth performance, in carcass traits, meat quality, or pig body temperatures. So again, thank you for your time here today. I'd also like to thank Lonza for providing the nicotinic acid used in the study, and also Pork Checkoff funding for partial funding of the study that we conducted. With that, I'll say goodbye.